A federal judge has blocked a Medicaid work requirement law that was brought up in 2 states, Kentucky and Arkansas. Now, the Medicaid work requirements were proposed and pushed by Donald Trump. And the whole point is, hey, if you're gonna receive federal money for your Medicaid program, well then maybe you should have a work requirement in order to ensure that these people aren't just deadbeats looking to get a handout from the federal government. And that's the thinking that we've seen from the Republican Party over and over again. Luckily, a federal judge has stepped in. This is US District Judge James Boasberg, and he's in Washington. He issued 2 decisions finding that Medicaid work requirements for low-income people in Arkansas and Kentucky pose numerous obstacles to getting health care that haven't been adequately resolved by federal and state officials. Let me give you an exact statement from his ruling. He says the Arkansas requirement was arbitrary and capricious because it did not address whether and how the project would implicate the core objective of Medicaid, the provision of medical coverage to the needy. So the argument here is, why are we attaching work requirements and these political talking points to he didn't call it a basic human right? But I see it as a basic human right. And so this is healthcare. This is providing people who are needy with healthcare, and we shouldn't attach that to anything else.
So I think that this is closer to a legitimate debate. I don't agree with the Republicans, and I agree with this judge in this particular case. But I think that if they attach it to welfare itself, that is a perfectly legitimate debate to have in America. And
isn't it attached to welfare though?
Well, and in some cases it is. And we might come out on the side of, and it depends on the legislation and how it's crafted, that no, it's not a good idea in that case either. I got my old conservative roots, and in some cases, depending on how the legislation is, I might vote yes on that. But you cannot attach it to Medicaid because that's talking about people's health care and their lives. So it's one thing to say, hey, listen, if you want federal assistance, you're gonna have to work for it, for cash payments or whatever it might be. But it's another thing to say, oh, you have cancer, well, get to work, go back to the mines, right? But I can't, I've got cancer.
Right.
Or even if I could, like are you threatening me with my life?
Right.
Because they basically are. Right. And what the judge is saying legally is, the work requirement in this case is not rationally attached to the purpose of Medicaid. Right. So that is why it's arbitrary and capricious. So that's why I think his ruling is right on legal grounds as well.
Right, and also just the actual definition of Medicaid when it was constructed in 1965 was that it would cover, it would give health care coverage to people that were low asset, pregnant women who effectively weren't working or couldn't work, parents of eligible children who were disabled, people with disabilities, and elderly people living in nursing homes. So, you're not, the entire definition of Medicaid was to provide additional coverage to people who actively couldn't work.
Right, yes, and so that's part of the reason why, one of the main reasons why I think the judge's ruling was correct here. Right. But I want to push back on you a little bit, Cenk.
How dare you?
No, actually I want to push back a lot. So
that's what I thought.
You brought up your conservative roots, and maybe these work requirements make sense when it comes to other programs, welfare. But look, I actually disagree with that. So I think that it makes sense to have certain regulations in place so people aren't taking advantage of it for too long. I don't know, we can have a debate about that. But first of all, most people who need those programs are working. They're already working, right? So the framing that we see from the Republican Party is purposely meant to make it seem as though individuals who need these subsidies or these programs are just deadbeats and they're lazy and they don't want to work. Also, look, if we're not gonna fix the issue with the minimum wage and not paying people a living wage, well then I don't wanna have a debate about work requirements related to welfare, right? I think at the heart of the issue right now, we have corporations that are taking advantage of deregulation, they're taking advantage of an incredibly low minimum wage on a federal level, and they're not taking care of their workers. So we need to solve that on a much bigger scale, I guess, and then At that point, when we have a system that's actually fair and does give people opportunities to work and make a living wage, then maybe we can have a discussion about maybe some requirements. But right now, work requirements is ridiculous.
And the access to healthcare. So
Right.
to bring that even bigger than that, we have an awful healthcare system, like however it is you look at it. And if people can't get access to it, this is one way to get access to that component of healthcare that was available to them. Our healthcare system, much bigger issue, needs to be completely made for everyone.
Yeah, now's the time of the program to be fair to me. So let me give you a little bit of context into what I mean by that. So first off, what do I even mean by legitimate and illegitimate? So when the Trump administration says we think we won the electoral, not only the electoral college, but the overall popular vote in 2016, because 3 million people voted illegally, but that's an illegitimate conversation. That's fantasy land. You made that up. It's a complete and utter lie. I'm not having a conversation or a debate about that. Then you can go to the next level, and when they say, hey, we want to get rid of Obamacare, which would get rid of health insurance for 21 million people, but we're better on healthcare than Democrats are. No, I guess that's better than your outright lie on the election, but it's not much better at all. That's an illegitimate debate. You can say, hey, listen, I think business interests are more important than average Americans. So yeah, I'm gonna take away healthcare from 21 million people, and I think that's a better policy. That would be at least honest, but you know you wouldn't win that debate, so that's why you lie about it. When you get to, hey, is giving too much cash assistance taking away motivation from people for working? I think that then is a completely legitimate debate. Even if you don't agree with that policy, I know, and I've talked about this in the past, when I got unemployment insurance, it was wonderful and it helped me a lot and I got back on my feet. But during that 6 months, I was a little less motivated to get back at it, okay? I'm keeping it real. And so, but Anna, if you say you don't take away food assistance, don't take away healthcare, I totally agree with you. And then your overall point about context is we haven't fixed anything.
Right, exactly.
If we fix all those things and then you want to have a legitimate debate about, hey, for cash assistance or for unemployment insurance, should there be a limit? What should that limit be? Should there be a work requirement? Man, it'd be refreshing to get to that debate once so many other things are fixed. That's the only thing I'm saying. And so that's why I want you guys to have the full context of what we mean.
And one other thing I want to note, because this always gets left out of the conversation when it comes to healthcare, welfare benefits and things like that. Like, it's a system that we've paid into, right? So when you were working, when you did have a job, you paid into it. It was taken out of every single check you made. And so don't allow people to make it seem as though these are just lazy bums looking for a handout. Oftentimes, they're A, already working, they're just not getting paid enough, and B, they've paid into this system.
Yeah, and last point on that, it's because Anna's making a super important point, and this goes to into the illegitimate bucket. So I remember a Republican congressman was asked about the minimum wage once and whether it should be increased. They're like, oh, those bums should get a job. You can't get a wage if you don't already have a job. So yeah, they already have a job. They're getting minimum wage. So, but in their minds, if you're not rich, you're a bum, okay? And earned income tax credits sometimes get the same thing. That's for the working poor. And the Republicans claim that they're always for tax credits and tax cuts, but when it comes to the poor, they're like, the bums, right? And they want to cut the earned income tax credit so that they can give more tax cuts to the rich. That is when you know that they are lying, disingenuous, and working for their donors instead of their voters.